Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well and welcome to the NFL Week 18, final week of the season DFS late playbook video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports. It's hard to believe, but we are here. We are at the conclusion of the NFL regular season, but we do have an excellent DFS slate, main slate ahead of us for this upcoming Sunday. So whether you play FanDuel or DraftKings, I've got you covered in this playbook video where we will break down core plays, best plays, players that I think you could build your lineups around and fit into your lineups to be successful this upcoming Sunday. So sit back, relax, and let's enjoy a final regular DFS season finale here this upcoming Sunday. Yo, hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to the channel. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. As always, I thank you guys for finding your way here, tuning in to the final week, the final regular season week of the NFL season. It's week 18. It's the first week 18 in NFL history, of course, being that they added an extra week to the season, but that means we are at the conclusion of regular season NFL DFS. So it is a sad day, but it is a day that has come, and we have to tackle it here in terms of DFS. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to talk about all the best plays, of course, core plays, things that you can build your lineups around, at least confidently build your lineups around to enter the slate's upcoming contest. Now, this is a week that you have to be careful in, both from an injury, COVID, everything that's played out over the last couple of weeks that is still in play this week. But more importantly, being that it is the final week of the season, you want to make sure you know which teams have something to play for, which players have something to play for, which teams are going to sit out, which teams don't give a crap. All that comes into play this week, and you're going to want to make sure you do your due diligence outside of just looking up numbers and players and all the stuff we've done all season long. You have some ancillary things that do come into play that are very, very important when setting your lineups for this weekend. So with that said, before we jump into the optimizer, I want to show you on DraftKings Nation. It's a great site. If you're into daily fantasy sports, you want to check out DraftKings Nation in general. But in general, they have something set up here that is very useful, and that's which teams have something to play for. It's all broken down for you guys. We won't go through it very, very heavily here, but you can see teams that must win. San Francisco 49ers, they must win to clinch a playoff position. The Rams have something to play for. They actually can advance in terms of their standings, in terms of where they are in the NFC playoff race in general. All of these teams, all of the things that we're going to talk about come into play from that perspective. The Colts, if they win, they're in. The Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens, I believe both of those teams technically can clinch a playoff spot if the Colts lose. So those teams have something to play for. The New Orleans Saints play for a playoff position also. If they win and the San Francisco 49ers lose, which is very possible, the Saints are in. You have other things playing out here. The Titans, of course, they can clinch a number 1 seed. The Chiefs can clinch a number 1 seed. Now, of course, that Chiefs play on Saturday, but you get the point here. All of these teams have something on the line this week. There's nothing suggesting that the Falcons or Houston or Denver or any of these other teams have any players sitting. We will talk about that here very shortly. The Bills could advance in terms of their AFC position for playoffs. They could also win the AFC East if the Patriots lose, I believe. Same thing with the Patriots. The Cowboys and the Eagles play on Saturday. The Cardinals, Seahawks, Cardinals, again, NFC team. A lot of these relate to their positioning, right? Teams can go from the number 2 seed down to the number 4 seed very, very quickly, which does matter in terms of home playoff opportunities, all of that. You have the Buccaneers, same deal here, playing Carolina. But what we do know, the Bengals and Cleveland Browns are both resting players. That includes Joe Burrow. Mixon's on, I think, COVID list now. Baker Mayfield has been shut down for the year. So all of that matters when selecting players. The Green Bay Packers are resting a lot of players this week. They may not rest them at the beginning of the game, but they should certainly rest them later on because essentially they don't have anything to play for. I believe they have certainly locked up that number 1 seed. And then, of course, the Eagles and the Cowboys. So my point here is websites like this exist. You need to go here. It's very, very important for week 18 for you guys to check that out. But we will get into it like we normally do here with the Daily Fantasy Nerd Optimizer. If you haven't done so already, make sure you go down in the description of this video, I have the links. I have the affiliate links. It does help the channel out a little bit. I do appreciate it. You get a free trial. Click on it. Check it out for the last week of the season. After this week, flip over and do NBA during the week or do whatever you want. NHL is available. All of those different sports are available through the Daily Fantasy Nerd Optimizer. It's an excellent optimizer. I'm so happy to have been able to share it with you guys this season in terms of the videos and that you guys enjoy these style of videos because, quite frankly, it's easier for me to edit and put these videos together, but you still get all the research and you get to actually see the breakdown of a lot of these players right before your eyes. So make sure you check out the optimizer here before you go any further. And please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. I appreciate you guys being here each and every week. It's surprising to me that we're already at the end of the season, week 18, conclusion of the NFL regular season. The channel has grown about 25-30% since the start of the season, which is, I mean, from my perspective, it's not a big channel, right? And from anyone's perspective, it's not that big of a channel. It seemingly is growing slow in terms of subscribers, but in reality, it's growing at a pretty high percentage rate each and every year. And it's because of you guys. It's because you guys continue to come back, watch the videos, share the videos, click on the videos, like the videos. All that stuff does matter. So I can't thank you guys enough for joining me here. We're not done yet. I'll do a lot of playoff stuff, a lot of playoff videos. Of course, if you've been with me the last couple of weeks, I put out short videos. So tomorrow, about an hour or less before lock, I will put out 15-second videos on YouTube here. They're shorts. They basically break down the optimizer with the stack. So I will lock in the stack players. Let's say it's Dak Prescott. I'll lock in him with some of his receivers and I'll hit optimize right before your guys' eyes. You'll get to see exactly what the optimizer is putting into lineups. It's very valuable for you guys. The only way you see it, though, is that you are subscribed to the channel, so make sure you do that. But besides that, let's jump into it here. I don't want to waste any more of your time. In terms of the layout here, only 3 games excluded from this slate. Those are the Saturday games and the Sunday night game. Everything else is in play. We talked about which teams are playing for something. Make sure you continue to pay attention to that. But the surprising thing here is there's only one game with it's not a high total, it's a 48 total. You can see Seattle at Arizona at 48 for an over-under. Nothing above 50, nothing above that 48. That game is, it's the highest game you're going to get on this particular slate. An indoor game with a 5.5 point spread at 48 for the Seattle-Arizona game. Everything else is pretty dangerously low in terms of Vegas totals, especially relative to this season. Things have been really, really high, especially over the last few weeks. Well, if you look now, there are so many games at or below 40 for an over-under, which is horrible, absolutely horrible. The Washington-New York Giants game, the Tennessee-Houston game, the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game, the Cincinnati-Cleveland game, the Carolina-Tampa Bay game, the New England-Miami, New Orleans-Atlanta, New York Jets, Buffalo. All those games are right around 42, or some of them even below 40. You don't have many options, right? That's pretty much 3/4 of the slate. You're going to have to be selective in selecting players out of those games. But in general, we always talk about Vegas. Not a lot of points are projected to be scored on this slate in terms of actual points in these games, and there's a lot of blowouts on the schedule. So make sure you're careful, make sure you're doing your due diligence as you select your players. And then for a final wrinkle, not that we need any more, there's 4 games on this slate with some potential weather issues. Washington at Giants, you have the Cincinnati at Cleveland game, you have the New England at Miami game, and the New York Jets at Buffalo. All of those showing precipitation. Some of that will be rain, some of that will be snow, some of that will be a combination of both. So make sure you pay attention to what's going on in terms of weather also. But again, I won't waste any more time here. We'll jump into the quarterback position, the stuff you guys want to see and hear, and starting with a raw overall projected point total. The top 5 guys, according to the Nerd Optimizer, include Josh Allen, Murray, Hill, Stafford, and Brady. And then in terms of value, you're looking at Allen, Murray, Hill, Stafford, and Tannehill. So those guys all in play for various reasons, but the guys I specifically like this week are Hill, Allen, Brady, and Wilson. I will start with Hill. He's going to be one of the highest owned quarterbacks, especially on FanDuel. And very quickly, sorry I didn't mention this, FanDuel is what we're looking at here in terms of pricing. So if it looks unusual when you play DraftKings, that is why. A lot of this analysis applies to both. I like the same players on both sites. Now, there are some value plays that open up based on pricing that are different between the two sites. But in terms of core overall plays, you can trust that a lot of these players are vice versa for me in terms of the sites here. But this week is FanDuel. Last week with DraftKings, it just so happens this week is back to FanDuel. So Hill is the number 1 guy in terms of ownership that I project for this particular slate, especially on FanDuel. He's a great cash game play. I have not mentioned that in previous videos very much because I don't play very much cash games, but if I did, Taysom Hill would be on my radar this week for a quarterback. $7,700, the price tag isn't too bad on FanDuel. Over his last 4 games, really only has one bad game. You're not going to get the 41 pass attempts that you saw in Dallas, but in general, this guy's going to throw the ball about 30 times. More importantly, he's going to run the ball 11 or 12 times a game. Very, very consistent run totals here outside of the yardage. The big thing here I mentioned already, San Francisco is the only thing preventing, well, they have to win, right? How it works out, San Francisco wins, they're in the playoffs. If San Francisco loses, New Orleans, which is very possible, they play the Rams on the road, the New Orleans Saints have to win, and they're in the playoffs. So that's what they're playing for here. And I think the Saints, Hill, everybody's going to be full go, right? They're going to be all in against a very bad Atlanta team this week. Atlanta, generally this season on defense, not very good against the run, not very good against the pass. It's going to be inside a dome game, very good for Taysom Hill, very good for typically fantasy projections. 22.3 points projected in terms of Vegas for the Saints. I like Taysom Hill. Again, gives you a very, very solid floor each and every week with just his rushing ability. If he can put the ball into the end zone 2-3 times in combination of rushing and passing, he's going to blow his salary out of the water here, and that's why I like him this week. Again, New Orleans has a lot to play for in terms of playoff implications this week. They have to win, so they're going to be all in, selling out versus a pretty weak Atlanta team. Josh Allen here, he is in play every week, right? He's Josh Allen, $8,800, the most expensive quarterback I like on this particular slate in terms of FanDuel. The guy has been up and down this season, hasn't been his best season overall, but still shows you that incredible ceiling that he offers. Has been running the ball a ton over the last few weeks. You're looking at 12 rushing attempts for 64 yards in week 16, followed by 15 attempts for 81 yards in week 17. Had 2 touchdowns in the red zone, although he has not been running the ball a lot over the last month plus in the red zone. If you look here, several games without any rushing attempts. Now, Singletary has eaten into a lot of those, but they have been in the red zone a lot. Had 6 red zone rushing attempts in week 17. But in general, it's Josh Allen. I'm not going to break him down too much here. I think he's in play this week. I talked about Buffalo playing the Jets, a really bad team at home this week. There should be some weather. Projected the second most amount of points in terms of a Vegas total here at 28.8. Again, there should be some weather, likely snow in Buffalo this week. But in general, Josh Allen in play each and every week, but certainly in play this week with, playoff positioning on the line. They don't want to drop. They could potentially still get a home playoff game. All of that in play this week for the Buffalo Bills. Tom Brady in play, $8,100 this week. Playing Carolina, last time he played Carolina, they did not do very much in terms of their passing game, but they still killed Carolina on the road. Now they get him at home here. The big thing here is we know a few things with Tom Brady. It has played out all season long. He's going to throw the ball 40, 50 times a game, even in blowout wins. There are very, very few, unfortunately Carolina is one of those exceptions, but very few exceptions where they're not throwing the ball at such a high clip, a high volume. In general, I like him this week because you can consolidate his passing game if you're going to stack him, if you're going to try to figure out where he's going to go with the ball. Well, now he's missing Antonio Brown. He's in New York somewhere doing something, God knows what. He's also missing Chris Godwin now. So you're talking Evans and Gronkowski as the primary targets for him. Again, you can consolidate and figure out and predict that target tree for Tom Brady this week, much more than you could in previous weeks. Throws multiple touchdowns pretty much all the time. There's, again, a couple games there towards the end of the season, 15 and 16, where he was off his horse a little bit, but it's Tom Brady. Again, they have a lot to play for in terms of their playoff positioning, home games, all of that in play this week versus Carolina. 24.8 projected points for Tom Brady and the Bucs. Big favorites. They don't have Fournette. I guess they have Jones. I think he's banged up, but they're going to have to throw the ball, and I like Tom Brady for that reason. Last but not least here, if we can continue to get this efficiency from Russell Wilson in the final week of the season, he can continue to do big things. So he went 20 for 29 last week with nearly a 70% completion rate, 236 yards and 4 touchdowns. Crazy, crazy efficiency numbers. It seems off the wall, but that is what has made Russell Wilson so special over the last few seasons. That's exactly what he does. He does, contribute in a very efficient manner. This has been a really bad season for him. This could be his last game in a Seattle uniform. I suspect he'll go all out, try to leave it with a banger. They are on the road this week versus the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals also have something to play for this week, although Seattle doesn't necessarily. The Arizona Cardinals do. Again, they're playing for some positioning here. Not a high projected total at 20.8 for the team here. They are underdogs, again, on the road this week. The way you attack Arizona is typically through the air. He's got great weapons, Metcalf, Lockett, but this is more of a low ownership play for me. Coming off of a great week, 27 points last week. Russell Wilson is just a cheap price tag at $7,500 that I think can put up big numbers at any given time. Now, we haven't seen it much this season, but it's something I'll take a chance on the final week of the season here in his potentially last game as a Seattle Seahawk. Moving over to the running back position here, some of these guys are going to be very, very obvious. Number one, in terms of projected points, is Jonathan Taylor by almost 4 points here. Almost 5, really. Jonathan Taylor, number one, Dalvin Cook, Kamara, Harris, and Montgomery. And then when you flip over to the value plays, Jonathan Taylor's still up there. Taylor, Cook, Montgomery, Singletary, and Harris are the top 5 in terms of value. For guys I like, similar names, right? Jonathan Taylor is in play every single week. Two things you can be sure of, and we haven't even gotten to the wide receivers yet, but the two things in fantasy in 20, 21, 22, Jonathan Taylor and Cooper Kupp will be the highest raw projected point scorers in fantasy. And again, Jonathan Taylor tops the list here. Now he's $10,200. That is a very, very expensive price tag for a running back on FanDuel. That is elite, high-performing, fully healthy Christian McCaffrey type of price tag here. But it can be worth it considering what he's done to Jacksonville in the past, what he's done to the NFL this season. Jonathan Taylor has been an absolute beast. In Week 10, he did play Jacksonville at home. They barely won that game, which is interesting as it has some implications this week. But in general, he had 21 attempts, 116 yards, and a touchdown. Also got 8 targets that game, catching 6 of them for only 10 yards. But in general, Jacksonville's defense, really, really bad. I don't have to explain Jonathan Taylor anymore. Dude's on absolute fire. The highest projected team from Vegas in terms of an implied team total at 29.8. They are massive favorites at 15.5 points. They are playing on the road here. Again, Jacksonville can't stop a soul on defense, let alone Jonathan Taylor in a running game. So I do like Jonathan Taylor just as much as anyone else this week, if you can find a way to afford him. Najee Harris, breakout game in Week 17 here, had 28 fantasy points on FanDuel, had 28 rushing attempts, coincidentally 188 yards, and a touchdown, 6.7 yards. Now, what I do know, because I watch a lot of Steelers football, I watch them play the Browns. The reason, I wouldn't say the reason, but a big reasoning behind this is they shuffled their offensive line a little bit. They did have some COVID implications and some injuries that made it happen, but they actually shuffled their offensive line a little bit. And sure enough, against a pretty good Cleveland run defense, a top 5 run defense, in fact, according to Pro Football Focus, they had an incredible game on the ground. Do I expect him to have 188 yards again? No. Do I expect him to rip 7 yards a clip? No. But in general, what I do know is the Steelers are going to continue to keep that same offensive line going into this week, both by necessity and by performance that they had in Week 17. They changed their offensive line coach. Baltimore's defense has been really, really bad this season. Really bad against the pass, but also really bad against the run. So Najee Harris in a good spot this week. Hopefully that offensive line being shuffled has figured things out a little bit. I mean, it's the last week of the season. They can technically still make playoffs. I mentioned that earlier. But Najee Harris in a good spot, in my opinion, this week at $8,500. David Montgomery has been, I think the statistic is over the last 6 weeks, has had the most opportunity of all running backs in the NFL. You can just look at it here. I mean, Week 17, he had 24 opportunities. Week 16, he had, 22 opportunities. Week 15, he had 24 opportunities. Week 14, 17. Week 13, he had 30 opportunities in Week 16, he also had 30. Just a ridiculous amount of opportunities, both from the passing game and on the ground here. Andy Dalton has been throwing the ball 11 targets over his last 2 games with Andy Dalton. David Montgomery, great play, $7,600. Pretty bad Minnesota team in general, kind of falling apart towards the end of the season. James Conner, really good season. A lot of red zone rushing attempts. Missed last week, should be back this week for Arizona against Seattle. Seattle's defense has been really bad this season. They're banged up. I'm pretty sure they're going to be missing some of their linebackers. I love James Conner if Edmonds is out. I still like James Conner a little bit if Edmonds is going to play, but definitely love him if Edmonds is out. Same thing here. Rashard Penny, the outside side of the ball, surprisingly having a great last couple of weeks of the season. Weeks 14, 16, and 17 here, just getting better and better. In week 17, had 25 attempts on the ground, also had 3 targets through the air, had 2 total touchdowns, but more importantly, had 170 rushing yards, and in fact has had 135 plus rushing yards in all 3 of his last starts. So Rashard Penny has been on fire to close the season out. And then last 2 guys here, Jarrett Patterson. If you're looking for a value play at $6,600, Antonio Gibson, they shouldn't play Antonio Gibson, but likely is out this week. Last week with Antonio Gibson out, he was the guy that got the majority of the rushing attempts, 12 for 57, scored a touchdown, also had a number of targets, had almost had 98 total yards, considering his passing game involvement. So good value play there. And then Devin Singletary, if you're not playing Josh Allen, huge favorites this week. As I mentioned, versus a really bad New York Jets team, 28.8 is their implied team total, second highest on the slate. Has been really, really good over the last 3 weeks. Has gotten a lot of opportunities. You can see a minimum of 18 opportunities each and every game over the last 3 weeks. More importantly, he's had 19 red zone rushing attempts over the last 3 weeks. It's basically Josh Allen or him running the ball. And Josh Allen has done it a few times, but it's been Singletary, believe it or not, over the last 3 weeks. So I do like him in a good spot versus the Jets this week. For wide receivers and tight ends, of course, you want to make sure you're stacking your players, your wide receivers, your tight ends with your quarterbacks. But in general, I talked about it already. Who's number 1? Cooper Kupp in terms of raw projection here. Justin Jefferson, Diggs, Brown, and Samuel follow him and round out the top 5. For value, you're looking at Kupp, Jefferson, Diggs, A.J. Brown, and then the surprising addition here is Christian Kirk. For guys that I like, I of course love Cooper Kupp again this week. He's about 130, 135 yards, whatever the number is, away from the NFL record for receiving. Everybody on the face of the earth, man, I can't even pronounce words. Everybody on the face of the earth knows about this record and the potential for him to break it this week, including his quarterback, including his team. So I suspect they're going to try their hardest to get him to break this record this week. So at $10,000, that is very pricey on FanDuel. But if you're suspecting 15 targets and 140 yards and potentially a touchdown, 10,000 doesn't seem that bad. So I suspect they are going to try to do that. They're going to try to get him to break that record this week in a good fashion. So this week is going to be a Cooper Kupp week, in my opinion. It's been it every week, but definitely at his price tag, I think he is in play versus San Francisco this week. Other guys that I think are in play, Stefon Diggs left a lot on the field last week. Stat line not very good, 5 receptions on 9 targets for 52 yards. But if you go back, Josh Allen and him, watch the tape, man, they had an opportunity to put a crooked number on the board for Stefon Diggs. And he's had, I would call it a little bit of a disappointing season, but in general, he has the ability to just go absolutely bonkers at any given time. This is a very important week for them in terms of their playoff positioning versus the Jets. If you like if you like Josh Allen, you got to like Diggs here. Mike Evans, one of my favorite plays at wide receiver this week, even without Tom Brady, simply because no AB, no Antonio Brown, no Chris Godwin. There's only one legitimate receiver outside of Gronkowski at tight end available for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that's Mike Evans. So there should be an increase in opportunity. There should be an increase in volume, in target share. All of that should go up this week for Mike Evans, making him a great play. Diontae Johnson, I talked about Baltimore's defense. They are decimated in their secondary, playing like, I don't know, 4th, 5th string, guys off the street in their secondary. So Diontae Johnson, any wide receiver against that secondary is a great play. Obviously a little bit limited by Ben Roethlisberger here, but if you go back to week 13, this guy, Diontae Johnson, tore up that same Baltimore team, 11 targets, 8 receptions, 105 yards, and 2 total touchdowns. He catches a lot of underneath stuff, but he can break away and score a deep touchdown here and there if Ben can just let it go and that offensive line can hold it up. So I like going back to Diontae Johnson, especially on DraftKings where receptions matter, because this guy has been extremely, extremely consistent, almost as consistent, if not arguably as consistent in terms of opportunity, in terms of targets as Cooper Kupp. Does he do what Cooper Kupp does? Absolutely not. But the guy does get a ridiculous amount of targets consistently here. A couple other guys I'll mention very quickly here. Darnell Mooney has been very good with Andy Dalton under center. You can see he's had, 29 targets over his last 3 games. He had 7 receptions on 13 targets last week. Now, the yardage isn't great, but he does get red zone targets, has had 5 over the last couple of weeks, has had 3, caught a touchdown in week 17. I'm not saying he's an elite receiver by any means, but he's $6,300. Seemingly has a good rapport with Andy Dalton here, so I do like Darnell Mooney. And last but not least here, for another value play at $5,700, Russel Gage. Now, obviously Kyle Pitts, Cordero Patterson are better overall plays from a fantasy perspective for the Atlanta team here, but in general, if you're looking for a comeback player that's cheap against the stack, for Atlanta, you're looking at Russel Gage, in my opinion. He's very, very cheap. He's been pretty consistent. If he gets into the end zone, really helps you out here. But New Orleans, if you're playing Taysom Hill, if you're playing players like that from New Orleans, if you're stacking New Orleans, I like Russell Gage as a cheap alternative to come back against that stack with. For tight ends, we will wrap it up here with tight ends. Mark Andrews, Kittle, Gronkowski, Ertz, and Pitts round out the top 5. While your value plays include Ertz, Kittle, Gronk, Pitts, and Andrews. So basically just a reordering of those same guys. I don't like all of them, but I do like some of them. Now, I like Kittle for the reasons I mentioned with a lot of New Orleans situations. A lot of the San Francisco situation comes into play too. San Francisco wins this game versus the Rams, a very tough opponent, by the way, on the road. They're in. Now, George Kittle is a key component to that passing game. He's one of the best, if not the best, tight end in the game. Week 10 versus the Rams had 5 catches on 7 targets for 50 yards for a touchdown. They're going to need that again this week. They killed the Rams at home, but now they're traveling. The Rams just won a game. The Rams are obviously also playing for playoff positioning here. Both sides of the ball here should be playing full go. In terms of playing all their starters. It's going to be a tough game, and for them to win, for San Francisco to make playoffs, they're going to need contributions from George Kittle this week. You're going to need to put the ball in the best players' hands, their best players' hands. So I suspect George Kittle will be force-fed the ball here a little bit in this Rams game. You have Gronkowski, same reason I like Evans, increase in opportunity, volume, target share, all of that with some of these wide receivers missing time. Godwin, AB, all of those guys out. Gronk should see an uptick, although $7,400 is a little bit pricey, in my opinion, for Gronkowski. They clearly priced him up from last week because everyone's out, but rightfully so because Gronk is in play this week. Favorite tight end this week, though, for me personally, is Zach Ertz. $5,600 is a wonderful price tag for a FanDuel tight end that's getting the opportunity and the targets that this guy is getting. You can see here he's had, 33 targets over his last 3 games. That's incredible. It's incredible for a tight end that's $5,600. More importantly, playing Seattle on the road in Week 11. That was his Arizona come-out game. Had 9 targets, 8 catches, 88 yards, and 2 total touchdowns. He continues to get red zone targets, basically 1 or 2 every single game. Seattle has been really, really bad against tight ends all season long. They're likely going to be missing some middle linebackers too this week, so that makes it even more of an enticing matchup for a tight end. Love Zach Ertz. Last but not least here, I talked about that Baltimore team, Claypool. I talked about Diontae Johnson, players like that, attacking that secondary that's been really, really bad, really, really banged up. Well, also Pat Freiermuth is in position to take advantage of that same secondary, that same weakness of that Baltimore defense. He didn't do much in Week 13 versus them, but for the most part, a chunk of the season, Pat Freiermuth, as a rookie, now he took a while to catch on here. He had a really good middle part of the season, got a concussion, missed some time here, but in general, the dude has really torn it up and has been a favorite target, probably more of a favorite target than, probably second favorite target, I would say, on that team behind Diontae Johnson for Ben Roethlisberger here. A very dependable, good hand receiver. I'm talking him up too much here. My point is, scored a lot of touchdowns, gets red zone looks from time to time, especially on this big early part of the season or middle chunk of the season. I suspect that'll be the same this week versus Baltimore. So that really wraps up the video here. We talked about all the different positions through the optimizer. I hope that all these videos are helpful for you guys. If you haven't already, make sure you go down below, check out this optimizer by signing up for the free trial. It's definitely worth it, especially if you plan to or intend to set multiple lineups. And by multiple, I mean even if you're doing 20 lineups. You don't have to be a 150 max entry guy, but if you're doing 20 lineups, this optimizer is going to help you in ways that you can't imagine. Make sure you set those lineups, not, set them in the best ways possible, and take advantage of as many different avenues as you can in terms of players, exposure, all of that stuff. So I highly encourage you to check it out. It's definitely worth it. But besides that, again, thank you guys so much for being a part of this season. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this channel, subscribing, liking videos, watching them. It's very, very important to me, and it's very, very meaningful. I wish you guys, all the best of luck for the rest of the season. Going into playoffs, we'll be putting out playoff videos here. I'll be also doing the short videos tomorrow, so make sure you are subscribed to check those out. But outside of that, I thank you guys again for such a wonderful season. Hopefully you guys are continuing to cash some games, cash some tickets, all that stuff here in terms of DFS. I wish you the best of luck this upcoming Sunday in the final NFL regular season DFS slate. I'll catch you in the playoffs. I'll catch you in the short videos, all that good stuff. Wish you the best of luck, and I'll catch you in the next video.